sexually abusing me from as far back as I can remember.
Remember a point in your life when you were not abused?
No.
Friends, today I have two stories for you of women who took the lives of their husbands. We will start with Dixie Shanahan, who murdered her husband and then lived with the corpse for a year. Then we will move on to Jessica Hill, who murdered her husband in a weird love triangle. In both cases, I have the appeal documents from the courthouses, so I'll read out exactly what happened. Dixie and Scott Shanahan were married in 1995 and they lived in Defiance in the state of Iowa in a house Scott inherited from his parents. Dixie worked at various jobs. They had two children during Scott's lifetime called Zachary and Ashley. They went on to have a third child, Brittany, who was born after Scott's death. Dixie and Scott's relationship was characterized by both physical and mental abuse. Dixie testified that Scott could flip on a nickel, threatened her life, and often threatened to take their children away from her. There were many instances of abuse which Dixie often attempted to cover up. 3 of the incidences led to the prosecution of Scott for domestic abuse. For example, on May 31st, 1997, the couple was driving home from going out in Iowa when an argument began. Scott punched his wife in the face, bruising both Dixie's eyes and cutting her lip. Dixie at the time told the police this wasn't the first time her husband had beat her. As a result, Scott Shanahan was arrested and charged with domestic abuse assault. He was convicted on June 23, 1997, and he was sentenced for up to 30 days in jail with 28 days suspended. He was placed on probation for 2 years and ordered to attend counseling. Now, just 4 months later, on September 8th, Dixie returned to police and reported an assault by Scott on July 27, 1997. She said her husband threw her out and would not let her take their baby, and that she feared he would flee with the child. Dixie reported that she would not leave the house without the baby and threatened to call police, which threw Scott into a tirade. Scott then grabbed her by the hair. He hit her on the face and he said, "If you call police, I'm going to kill you." Dixie was bleeding from the head from the assault and Scott had pulled the phones out of the walls. She stated she could not get away long enough to report the incident. She also informed the sheriff's department that she was 2 months pregnant with the couple's second child and that she feared a miscarriage if the assaults continued. Now on July 21st, 2003, the Shelby County Sheriff's Office received a call from a concerned citizen who advised law enforcement that Scott had not been seen in or around Defiance for a considerable amount of time, which the caller considered was weird. It was out of the ordinary.
Sheriff Kavanaugh, in the course of your duties as the Shelby County Sheriff, did you receive a missing persons report regarding Scott Shanahan?
Yes, sir, I did.
Could you tell us the date that you would have received that report?
July 21st of 2003.
And could you give us just a basic idea of what the report was?
Yes, sir. I had a call from a concerned citizen that thought maybe we should look into the whereabouts of Scott Shanahan. He hadn't been seen for probably a year. And this person that called indicated to me that this just wasn't like Scott to just up and leave everything.
Sheriff Gene Kavanaugh first tried to locate Scott in the city of Atlantic because the officers had heard he might be there, but they were unable to find him there. Deputy John Kelly visited Dixie the following day. They talked on the sidewalk outside her residence. Dixie told Kelly that Scott had left their residence in August 2002 and she did not know where he was, but she thought, hey, maybe he is in the city of Atlantic. She stated she had not seen Scott since that time, but said he called her around February 2003 in regards to the birth of their third child. She also told police that she believed Scott was calling her periodically, hanging up, essentially harassing her. Dixie stated her sister in Texas was making the house payments along with the insurance and tax payments. Now, she also denied that she sold some of Scott's tools, but she did admit she was in another relationship with a man in the same state of Iowa. On July the 23rd, 2003, Dixie went to the sheriff's office and spoke with Kavanaugh, wanting to know why the sheriff's office was checking on Scott. So as you can see, the police got a tip that Scott is missing. They go ask Dixie. Dixie's like, well, I don't know where he is. But then she starts thinking, hold on a minute. How do they know he's missing in the first place? This must have been playing on her mind. She wanted to know, where are they in the investigation? Are they looking into this in more detail? What will happen if they search my home? And I think she started to get worried and pensive, hence why she went to the police looking for answers. She also asked if she was being accused of doing something to Scott, which the police denied. Now, at the time, she gave the police the name of an individual who claimed to have seen Scott in Harlan in Iowa in April 2003. The next day, Kavanaugh and Dixie spoke in the driveway of her residence. She told Kavanaugh that Scott left in August 2002 after he became angry with her over her pregnancy. She also told police that before Scott left, he hit her when she refused to have an abortion. She also said that when he left, she wasn't at home, took all his clothes, took all his possessions, and took a large withdrawal from their mutual funds account. She also stated he did not take a vehicle with him. Now, on October the 17th, 2003, law enforcement officers from the Shelby County Sheriff's Office and the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation made an application for a search warrant to search Scott and Dixie's residence, the property, to find blood or any hair fibers or any DNA samples of Scott. But more importantly, they were looking for computer hardware or any kind of dangerous weapons or any of Scott's body parts or maybe even the body itself. The police also learnt that the Defiance Post Office did not have a forwarding address for Scott, but Dixie was picking up his mail. It was said from one of Scott's friends that he heard from a meter reader in Defiance that a bedroom window was open in the Shanahan house all of the previous winter. They also discovered Scott's mutual fund account was depleted in August of 2002, and numerous insufficient fund checks were drawn on it in August and September of the same year, bearing Scott's signature. Police also realized that Dixie had sold one of Scott's vehicles and perhaps the contents of his shop building. Scott's bank account was frequently overdrawn in the summer of 2002, but had been inactive for nearly a year. Dixie was receiving public assistance based on an application she filed on September the 11th, 2002. According to the bank's mortgage records, in October 2002, a letter supposedly signed by Scott requesting the bank to add Dixie's name to the account. So the police took all this information and they thought, it seems like he's been murdered. And this is what led them to search the residence. The officers who processed the residence found the northeast bedroom of Dixie's residence blocked off with various items in the hallway. A rolled up towel was placed at the base of the bedroom door alongside 2 air fresheners. In the bedroom, the officers found human remains on the bed, under the covers, in the position of lying on the right side and stomach area. The body was clothed only in briefs, and a television remote control was at the end of the left foot. The body had its head on a pillow, with a second pillow placed between its legs and a third pillow tucked within its left arm. An officer at the crime scene described this position as typical of someone lying in bed, resting or sleeping, just lying on their side with their head on a pillow and a pillow between your legs and one under your left arm. The remains were later identified as the body of Scott
Shanahan's body at that point.
As I mentioned, the body was markedly decomposed, partially skeletonized, and partially mummified. There were pupa cases on the body. That's what insects leave, flies often. There was a golden brown stringy stuff that had been left by insects covering much of the body. The body was only clad in a pair of undershorts, and it was lying on a sheet and some pillows.
It was determined he died from a gunshot wound to the back of the head. The officers did not find the shotgun that killed Scott during the search of the residence, but located it later in the children's bedroom closet. During the search, Dixie was at the home of Kathy Myers.
Would you know what he looks like?
No.
Did you ever ask the defendant, or did she ever tell you where Scott was?
That he had left.
Did she say where he had gone?
She had heard Avoca.
She told you that he was living in Avoca?
Yes.
Did she describe to you in any way the circumstances under which he left?
That he had been very abusive to her, and that at the time that he had left, he had not wanted the baby that she was carrying, Brittany, and he had been abusive at that point, and she wanted him out of there because she was afraid for Brittany's life.
As in, she wanted to rid him, thinking he would do something to their newly born or about to be born daughter. At trial, Dixie explained her relationship with Scott at the end of August 2002 was very, very rocky, and she was being very badly abused by him 3 or 4 times a week. She said when she found out she was pregnant with Brittany, Scott went ballistic and told her to have an abortion, but she refused. She testified they fought for several days, with Scott beating Dixie. During the abuse, Scott would tell her he would make sure she would not have the baby, and there was nothing she could do about it. She went on to testify that on August 30th, 2002, Dixie woke up around 6:30 a.m. and woke her children. She sent Zachary to school before Scott awoke. When Scott woke up, he became enraged because Dixie did not wake him up before Zachary left. She stated he then pulled Dixie by the hair and hit her in the stomach, hollering he was going to kill the unborn baby one way or another.
Were things pretty bad right now?
Yes.
Then what happened?
I was gonna leave, and I was gonna stop and pick Ashley up. He ultimately followed me back into the house.
All right, now when you say you were
into the
going
garage.
Just a second. I'm hearing, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
Clear.
do you need a moment to?
No. I was going to take the car and leave. He ultimately followed me out and said there was no effing way that I was going to take the car. And he took the keys.
What did he do with the keys? Do you know?
He had them with him. He took them.
Then what happened?
He dragged me by my hair back into the house.
Now, when you say he drug you by your hair, what do you mean?
He literally dragged me by my hair, pulled my hair. I had chunks of hair that he had pulled out.
Were you standing or on the ground?
I was on the ground
How did you get on the ground?
because he had knocked me on the ground
And then grabbed you by the hair,
and pulled me back in.
physically pulled
Physically
you in
pulled me in back into my house
by your hair.
by my hair.
Then what happened?
He was punching me again in the stomach.
What was he saying while he was punching you?
I'm gonna kill this baby. You're not having this baby.
Then what happened?
I was still laying there because I was bawling. He took off into the other room. He came back with a gun.
He came back with a gun,
Yes,
the shotgun we've already seen.
yes.
Then what happened?
There was some shells, and he was hollering the whole time. He was just like in a rage.
All right, now describe that. When you say he's in a rage, describe physically what he's doing.
He's shaking. He's in that much of a rage. He's just shaking. And telling me that I'm a SOB, I'm a bitch, every name. You name it, I was called it.
Then what happened?
He, right across from where I was on the floor was where he had shells up in the cupboard.
All right, now by shells up in the cupboard, what are you talking about? Where were they and what were they in?
They was on the top shelf, and I don't know whether they was in a box or a jar or...
And what did he do?
He grabbed some.
Did he have the gun at this time?
Yes, he did.
Where were you?
Still on the ground.
Could you see him?
Yes.
Could you see the gun?
Yes.
Could you see the shells?
Yes.
What did he do?
He put shells into the gun.
Did you see what shells he put in the gun?
I only knew that he put 2 different ones in
How did you know that?
because I've seen him do it.
So you knew there was 2 shells in the gun.
Yes.
Did you watch him load it?
Yes, I did.
After he loaded it, what did he do?
He pointed at me and told me that this day is not over yet. I will kill you.
When he pointed that gun at you, what did you think was going to happen to you?
That he was going to shoot me.
Then what happened?
He finally walked away. I went back and sat in the living room chair. He came back out of rage, started beating on me some more.
What, was he saying anything while he was beating on you?
This day is not over yet.
Did he threaten you?
Yes, he did.
What was the threat?
That he was going to kill me.
Just you?
And no, and my baby, I was pregnant at the time. There was no way I was going to have this baby.
So he threatened you again,
Yes,
and the unborn baby again.
yes.
Did he say anything about the other 2 children?
No.
Were you concerned about the other 2 children?
Yes, I was.
Was he still in a rage?
Yes, he was.
What happened then?
He went back in the bedroom and was laying down. I decided, first of all, I need to back up a little bit. He had also taken the phones out of the phone jacks and taken them in the bedroom.
How many phones did you have?
2 plus 1 in the bedroom.
All right. Where were, besides the one in the bedroom, where were the other 2?
On the kitchen counter.
What did he do with those phones?
He took them in the bedroom with him.
So the only phone at that point in time was where?
In the bedroom.
Where was he?
In the bedroom.
What did you do next?
I decided that I needed to get the cops in there because it was that bad. I went to the bedroom to get to the phone.
Where is the phone in that bedroom?
It was over in the corner, right beside the bed.
What did you do next?
Went to grab for the phone.
What happened?
He started coming at me.
Was there anything else that you saw there? Next to the phone?
The gun was sitting right beside the phone. It was leaned up against the wall.
What did you do?
When he started coming at me, I grabbed the gun and shot it.
At that point in time, were you convinced he was coming at you?
Yes.
What did you think you needed to do?
Protect myself.
She claimed she needed to protect herself and did not have any other choice but to fire the gun. Dixie said she set the gun down, walked out of the bedroom, and sat in a chair for a couple of hours. She described herself as very upset, thinking about what she did and what she was going to do. Still unsure about what she was going to do, Dixie went back into the bedroom, pulled up the sheets to cover the body, retrieved the telephone and the gun, shut the bedroom door, and put a towel underneath it. She put the gun in the children's bedroom closet. Dixie never did anything else with Scott's body and never told anyone what happened. She and her children continued to live in the house trying to live a normal life. She told people lies about Scott so she could avoid going to jail. She said she went into the bedroom 3 times after the shooting, all in the same day. She said that at the time of the shooting, the window was open and she was too scared and afraid to go to that side of the room to close it, hence why it was open the whole time. Now, the day of the shooting, Dixie drove to a store and signed a check in Scott's name. The check was drawn on the mutual fund account. She wrote checks bearing Scott's signature from that account totaling $1,900 after he died. When the mutual fund dishonored the checks, the stores sent letters to Scott at the Defiance residence. Dixie replied to these letters blaming Scott for the problem. Dixie also wrote a letter to the mortgage company, again signing Scott's name, so she could have her name added on the account to deal with the late mortgage payments. In addition, she sold Scott's property netting around $10,000. She then sent the money to her sister in Texas, gifted it to her, so then she would avoid having to report it to, the public assistance program thing or whatever it's called. Now, regarding the trial, prosecutor Charles Thoman believed Dixie Shanahan grew resentful toward her husband, not because of the frequent abuse, but because her mother-in-law did not include her in the inheritance. So you see the angle that the prosecutor went with. The prosecutor said, yeah, she may have been abused, but she was really angry because the mother-in-law didn't like her and she didn't like the mother-in-law. The prosecutor said that after she shot her husband, she continued to lie about his whereabouts and signed his name to checks she knew would bounce. When the retailers wrote to the Shanahan residence to inform them that the checks had bounced, she wrote back saying Scott had moved to Atlantic and she had no forwarding address. The prosecution acknowledged Dixie Shanahan was abused by her husband, but contended that each time Scott was charged with domestic assault, she would write letters requesting leniency or dismissal of all the charges against him. The prosecutor believed Dixie acted with malicious intent and all of this was premeditated. The prosecution also contended that the murder weapon was improperly loaded with 1 bullet that was the wrong size, causing the gun to jam after the first shot was fired. This bit of information is pertinent because Scott was a gun enthusiast and it's more than likely he would have known how to avoid a gun getting jammed. Dixie herself, she entered a plea of not guilty, and her defense argued that after the years of abuse and threats of death, the defense contended she had no alternative if she wanted to protect herself and their unborn child. As for leaving the body in the bedroom for more than a year, the defense argued Scott still had control over Dixie even after his death. Now, on the 10th of May 2004, Dixie was found guilty of second-degree murder and she was sentenced to 50 years in prison, with 35 years of those mandatory.
This is the state of Iowa versus Dixie Lynn Shanahan. The form of verdict used by the jury is form of verdict number 2. We find the defendant guilty of murder in the second degree. You can be seated.
Or was she? In January of 2007, Governor Tom Vilsack shortened her sentence and said the mandatory time she needs to serve is 10 years. Now, I searched the Iowa inmate prison list and her name isn't there, so my guess is she's now been released. So what do you think the conclusion should be? She was obviously abused, right? And like I said, any man that hits a woman, right, that's a different level of childishness, immaturity, pusillanimous motherfucker right there, right? We all agree with that. But I don't think he deserved to die either. In many ways, I can understand Dixie's actions, but then there's no excusing them. So the 50 years or the 35 years kind of makes sense, but then again, 12 years doesn't make sense. I don't really know how I should feel about the conclusion. What I do know is that Scott should have been punished sooner, and the authorities should have acted sooner, as all of this could have been avoided. We now move on to Jessica Hill. This story took place in May of 2007 in Boone County, Iowa. Jessica began dating Shane Hill when she was 16 years old. They married in 2002, and 2 children were born to the marriage. Daniel Blair, a mutual friend of theirs, lived with the Hills and helped raise the children. Now in 2005, Shane discovered that Blair and Jessica were having an affair. Jessica then decides to leave the house and move in with Blair and took her 2 children with her. But after about 3 months, Jessica took the kids and moved back in with Shane. And my question to you is, If you're Shane, what are you doing at this moment? Imagine that. Your wife is having an affair with someone else. She then goes and moves in with that someone else, and she comes and moves back. And not only that, she took the kids back and forth. What would you do? I don't understand why Shane would let her back in. You see what I'm saying? Shane and Blair tried to repair their friendship, but this was unsuccessful. As a result, there was tension between the two men who, according to a friend, always said they were going to hit each other. Shane worked on a sheep farm and often carried a pistol while he did chores. On May 28, 2007, at approximately 11 a.m. and again at 11:15 a.m., Shane called 911 to report that he had accidentally shot himself. He died shortly thereafter. An ensuing investigation revealed that Shane in fact had been gunned down. Jason Christensen, special agent with the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, or DCI, and another officer spoke with Jessica for roughly 20 minutes at the Boone County Sheriff's Office on the date of Shane's death. Jessica said, "I don't know anything, I don't know who would do this to Shane." Jessica then volunteered she had an affair with Blair in 2005, but stated that she and Shane were back together and at the strongest point in their relationship. She told the officers she did not think Blair was involved in Shane's death. Jessica informed the officers she had last seen Blair 4 months earlier when she saw him walking as she drove through Boone. On May 30, 2007, 2 officers spoke with Jessica and with Shane's parents at the Boone County Sheriff's Office. Terrence Cowman, special agent in charge with the DCI, testified that he brought the family in to have them listen to the tapes of Shane calling 911. Cowman stated Jessica was stoic while she listened to the tapes and showed no emotion. And after these 911 calls were played, Jessica requested that no more ballistic testing was done on Shane's body. On May 31st, 2007, Cowman spoke with Shane's mother, who informed him that the content of messages on a computer used by Jessica suggested she was involved in an ongoing relationship with Blair. After receiving this information, Cowman contacted Jessica and asked her to come to the sheriff's office a 3rd time. The police then brought Jessica in again for an interview. This interview was recorded, and I've requested this interview from the police, so hopefully they'll give it to me soon. During the interview, Jessica initially stated that she and Blair talked periodically after the affair for roughly 2 years. She also stated that after she saw Blair walking by the side of the road roughly 4 months earlier, she contacted Blair and they got together once. She stated this was roughly 2 to 3 months earlier and was the only time she had been with Blair since the affair in 2005. Officers informed Jessica they were interested in her relationship with Blair because they believed it was more than what she was telling them. I also think at this point of the investigation, when she said, "Yeah, I did speak to Blair every now and again after the affair," I think we can all gather they were probably talking the whole time. She admitted to meeting Blair after working at his place. She also stated that Blair came to Shane's mother's home on the night of Shane's death. She admitted to having sexual contact with Blair within the last 2 weeks. She stated that Blair loved her and knew she was not happy with Shane, but he also knew she would never leave Shane for him. And this is the bit that makes me angry. Okay, you loved her, you didn't love her. She loved you, she didn't love you. It doesn't fucking matter. Nobody is worth killing over. I'll come on to that shortly. She admitted to telling Blair and others on many occasions that she wished Shane would disappear, but described these statements as things you don't really mean, but you say. She expressed sadness over the fact that her relationship with Blair was no longer hidden. Jessica did tell officers that her and Blair did exchange messages on the day of Shane's death. She messaged Blair and told him Shane had finally left for work. She stated this was a regular occurrence. She stated that at one point Blair asked what Shane was driving and she provided that information. She also expressed again to Blair that she wished Shane would never come home. When asked, Jessica stated she did not suspect that Blair harmed Shane. She said on previous occasions she had told Blair she would never want him to be the one that shot Shane. Jessica stated that she did not tell anyone to kill Shane, she did not pay anyone to kill him, she does not know anything about his murder and did not want it to happen. But there was evidence that implicated Blair and his roommate Aaron Moss. You see, in May 2007, Blair and Moss obtained a rifle, and on May 17, 2007, Blair, along with an unidentified man, but presumably Aaron, they bought 2 boxes of ammunition. Now, around the time of Shane's calls to 911, a passenger in a car saw a man, whom he later identified as Moss, walking across the farmyard carrying a rifle. DNA matching Moss's DNA was found on the sling of a rifle from which a bullet recovered from Shane's body had been fired. Fingerprints made by Blair and Moss were found on the ammunition box. Blair spoke with a friend, her name was Lisa Lewis, the weekend before Shane's death and requested that she provide an alibi to him. He requested that if anyone asked anything about him, she say that she was with him all day on Memorial Day. When Lewis saw Blair on the evening of May 28th, he informed her that they had made somebody disappear. Blair texted Lewis later that night to inquire whether she had said anything about the conversation and to ask that she not discuss their conversation with anyone. Lewis did talk to Blair several days after Shane's death, and Blair did say that they shot somebody. Lewis testified that Blair said they did this because they did not like the way he was treating his wife and they would be together no matter what. Blair further informed Lewis that Aaron is the one that pulled the trigger. Lewis testified that when Blair told her they shot somebody, she assumed he meant himself and Moss. Lewis had been friends with Moss and Blair for several months and did not know Jessica. Now, Jessica was initially found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder and was sentenced to 50 years in prison in 2010. But after her appeal, this was overturned and she was sentenced to 12 years in prison in 2013. Blair was found guilty of first-degree murder and he was sentenced to life in prison. Aaron was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 50 years in prison. But what is the moral of the story? Well, not moral, but what is the story here? The story here is a woman who played her husband. She did not pull the trigger, and ultimately her husband obviously did not deserve to die, but nobody is worth killing over. She wanted Shane and you know the husband and the security and the family life, right? But she also wanted her fun too with Blair. She even played Blair. Blair's the one that killed him, right? And Blair's the one that deserves to be in prison for life. However, she did play Blair. I'm guessing the whole time she must have said sweet nothings to Blair. I love you. I want to be with you. This is so hard. I have kids. I can't leave my husband. Blah, 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 blah. If you ask me, 12 years in prison, mate, the 50 years is more than sufficient because I can only imagine the emotional damage she would have done to Shane. Think about it, right? Shane is there in the house and her wife says, I am going to take your kids and I'm going to move in with another man and there's nothing you can do about it. Just imagine that scenario. That's basically what happened. And you could argue maybe Shane, should never have taken them back, but it's so hard to say no to your kids. I can only imagine that when she said, oh, Shane, I'm so sorry, I want to come back in the house, Shane thought, well, fuck you, bitch, but I want to be with my children. So for them, I'll suck it up and I'll take your presents. You understand what I'm saying? So if you ask me, lock her up. Thank you for watching.